All right, welcome everybody. I'm Lewis and I'm with my good friend, study buddy, academic friend.
Well, I'm just going to set up make it look good.
That's all right. Hakeem Beedar.
How we going? How you doing?
Good. This is the first episode or the first time we've tried something like this, so it should be a bit of fun. But yeah, we're just going to have a relaxed time and talk about a few things. Hakeem is Masters of Speech Pathology with myself. We've known each other at the University of Adelaide doing an undergraduate together. He also has a history of teaching me linguistics as well, which is pretty fun. Hey guys, it's Lewis. Just before we get into it, this podcast is heavily linguistic. Hakeem and I both have a background in linguistics as well as studying a Masters of Speech Pathology together. So today our content is going to be very, very language specific and we're going to talk about terms that may be unfamiliar, but I hope you can watch it and take a leaf out of our book and see what we're studying and what we're interested in, and hopefully you can learn something new. Hope you enjoy the episode, and without further ado, this is Hakeem Beedar, and there's maybe more episodes to come with him. See you guys soon.
As Lewis said, I'm Hakeem. Yeah. I'm very interested in linguistics, and I was doing a Master of Philosophy and Linguistics in 2021, where I was looking into language revival. So my background is, I have a little bit of language revival study under my belt, and I actually worked with a professor at the University of Adelaide, Professor Gillard Zuckerman, where we did language revival with the Bangla people of the Port Lincoln area. Helping to revive one of the indigenous languages of Australia. So I've got a little bit of practice in that field. I've also worked on a project with an individual named Manny Rayner. And if any of you go on Goodreads at all, you'll see that Manny often actually has like the top review of a book. He's everywhere on Goodreads. But he's from the University of Geneva, and I worked on his personal project, which is called Lara, which is sort of a model using native speakers to help read books to help people learn languages. I would implore you to look at University of Geneva's Lara. It's actually very good, and Manny is these days trying to incorporate AI into it as well. And AI will be another topic that I think that we should bring up often, because AI is a very good modern day model that, as I was saying before, is kind of making progression in the field of modern day linguistics that's actually refuting a lot of like Chomskyan ideas.
It's like AI has become language models. Like we say AI, when the reality is they're just large language models. Exactly. Which is a huge linguistic
Which I think poses very interesting philosophical questions of what necessarily makes us human. When we look at like a language model and we call it an AI, right? Artificial intelligence, but all it is propagating language.
Exactly. Like you could argue that just because someone can speak and compute language, does that mean they're consciousness?
Yeah.
Because you can get into more of a philosophical debate.
Let me ask you a question. Okay. Let's go from there. Let's just start from here. I bring a parrot. Like, I have a pet parrot. I bring him, his name is Budgie.
That's good.
We'll call him Budgie.
Yeah.
And Budgie the Budgie. Budgie the Budgie. And I teach him how to say, Polly want a cracker or whatever, right? And he can repeat that. Does he understand language?
Well, same thing. I could say bonjour.
Yeah.
Does that mean I speak French?
It's a very good question. There's another
That's a good point.
idea in computer science, actually, that relates to this, where they say you teach a computer a Chinese dictionary, right? And you have inputs and outputs for English to Chinese or vice versa, and it can perfectly translate Chinese into English or English to Chinese. Does that computer know how to speak Chinese? If I use that computer, do I know how to speak Chinese? Obviously, I'm not a computer scientist, and I don't think I've articulated the idea well enough, but the principle is still there. Does input and output necessarily mean that you can speak the language? Most people, I think, would say no.
Well, you could argue that, like, we have language as a bunch of computing zeros and ones at a small level, so we can say 1 + 1 = 2, so we could argue that we break down language into its finer parts, like phonemes, morphemes, all that kind of stuff, and connect these abstract things. But there's almost like at a larger scale language, and you've got like colloquialisms, idioms, kind of cultural interpretations. In the undergraduate that we did together, we learned a lot about how culture is language, and like, well, how can that be when like blue isn't red, But however, the more you zoom in, the more they're different. So you could argue that if things can be predicted as if 0 and 1 and 2 is like in a sequential order, then someone could learn the patterns of
That's really
language
good.
as an AI model to be able to...
I think that you're exactly right of that, though, because that's exactly what most modern-day linguists will argue, again, as far as I understand, how a language actually works. Like, the model of language is that it's actually predictable, and that it's based off of probability of words appearing one after the other. We have a very rudimentary system in everyone's phone where, you write hello, and then you just click predictive text, and you'll find that if you zoom in on each sentence, you look at the first 3 words, it's a cohesive sentence. The issue is with predictive text is that the 17th word is not contingent on the first word anymore. It's only contingent on like an n, where n is equal to any value that you want. Generally, it's going to be pretty low, like 2 or 3 words before it. So the issue is, of course, right, is that as humans, when we're talking, and I'll point to the linguistic phenomenon of what's it called? What's the word?
What's it entailing?
When I'm agreement. Agreement is what I want to talk about. Agreement is a linguistic phenomenon wherein, essentially, I will modify one of my words to actually match one of the words that I said prior in the sentence, no matter how far away it is. So if I were to say example, and I'm going to embed several clauses to actually break it up. Actually, no, let me give you an example. I'll start with a very simple sentence, and then I'll go into a more complex sentence structure. Yeah. So you say, he goes to the shops, right? In opposition to I go to the shops. The way that I am conjugating go is into the third person progressive, right? Because it's agreeing with the third person marker, which is he, right? So the third person marker in this case is the S, the third person pronoun, I should say. And that differs from I or you go, right? Because the way that we just do it in English is that we have to mark for the... I don't remember the exact name, like which kind of person it is, right? The pronoun that's
and
being
we do
used.
that, I guess, semantically. Well, not semantically, syntactically. Like we actually, there's a marker that indicates that this has changed in the sentence, which applies this weird phenomenon.
Exactly, yeah. That's called agreement. Now, the cool thing is of agreement is that I could say that the man who, for many, many years, has been struggling to get out of bed due to issues that happened to him earlier in life. And I can keep adding to that. Adding to that.
It's like, this reminds me of like the phenomenon, I think, Deixis, where it's like, that guy at that place next to that thing on that hill with the thing, and you're just keeping adding on things.
Is it called Deixis, or is it called... I think it's called...
Fact check it.
We can. It's not a bad idea. I'm interested. I can't remember what it's called. Embedding... No. Because
it's like, when I was at that place, that time when we were there, at that thing over that place at that time when we were there, and you're saying things, but you're not actually saying it.
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean.
How would you spell it?
Diaxis. Diaxis. I don't know. I've never heard the word, to be honest with you.
Okay, really?
Yeah.
Okay, that's all. Gillard's Zuckerman might have coined it. Here we go. In linguistics, diaxis is the use of general words and phrases to refer to a specific time, place, or person in context. So, here, now in a sentence you read this here and now. So I think I might have used it in a wrong way.
I understand.
No, I put up a picture. This is the picture that I'm going to show Hakeem.
Put that right here.
But that's what... It's like you're not...
okay.
You're not actually, so I'm not sure if that's what the coin term is, but
what
I know...
Diaxis is that it's a contextual word. If I say the word it, right? What are you talking about? I'm talking about this pen. It's gold.
Right, that's right. I'm actually getting it confused. It's like... I went to the pool. It was fun.
We're talking about
the it in that like semantically.
Yeah, it was
means pool.
going to the pool. The act of going to the pool. That's right.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It doesn't matter what the name of the phenomenon is, right? Because we go back to what I was saying. So he who struggles to go out of bed due to the many things that happen to him goes to the shops. Do you see how you can just keep adding words in between he and goes? Right, you can add as many as you want, but eventually, right? Let me just give you an example. I want to say he who has been struggling to get out of bed for many years due to his inability to rise early in the mornings, go to the shops. Your brain instantly goes, what? That's wrong.
Yeah.
You can pick it up. Which demonstrates that your brain has been storing the word he since I started talking, and I could go on for years. Not actually. But I could go on for ages, adding more and more information, modifying he, right? And the second I say go, you're like, wrong. That's incorrect. That doesn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
So that demonstrates to me that your brain has been storing the word he since I started talking, right? It's been paying attention.
Interesting.
While I've been adding more detail, it's not relevant to the main clause, which is he goes to the shops. Those are just sub-clauses that are adding description to the word he.
That's interesting.
Right. But I only bring that up because that is an example of agreement, which necessarily demonstrates, I believe, that language is predictable to
there's like an abstract thing that we all kind of agree on how language should function.
Oh, yeah, that's a bit different, but you are right in that regard, because that's where we would argue that a modern day language processing model not fail, I would say is correct, right? Where they talk about how it's just pattern recognition,
and that's
and it
because
goes back to
is that
culture.
because we are biological machines that interpret patterns, which is language.
Yeah, I personally completely believe that. And that's what a lot of modern day linguistics, as far as I understand, will begin to actually make arguments.
Because what I never used to... Because like when I was learning Japanese, the biggest thing that I had was I'd learn Japanese, right? And I'd do textbooks. And I learned it from year 7 to year 12 and then did it in university. But we all did languages in high school and we hated them. But as soon as it became personal, I had to do it and blah, blah, blah. Of course. Long story. But it came to this point where it's like, they just say that. It doesn't, like, stop trying to figure out each morphological process or semantic process. It is what it is.
Exactly,
right? So, for example, when I say, like, the black big cat, like, it's not the big... Oh, is it the big black cat?
I would say the big black cat.
Okay, this is another preface here. I did linguistics at university, and it actually made me worse at native English speaking.
It makes you...
My spelling got worse. I'm more phonetically consistent. It's
too much on your mind
issues.
now.
Anyway,
ignorance is bliss.
I do spoonerisms all the time. Instead of saying...
It's a natural thing.
Instead of saying
it's
smart fella, I'll say fart smeller. And I'm like, oh. No. But, so I used to think, like, I used to struggle to kind of breach that gap of, like, processing versus... So why do you think that we have these natural patterns like the big black cat instead of the black big cat? It just sounds...
That is as simple as I would say, is that if you look it up after this and you add it, boom, put a picture right here.
Edit this up.
No. There was a very interesting news article that talks about it, and it demonstrates that there is normally a certain type of adjective that will come at a certain place in the word order before it modifies the head of the sentence, before it modifies the main part of the sentence. And it follows, I don't remember it all, but it talks about size description, colour description, it will follow a certain order.
So what you're saying is, the way I'm feeling is not your feeling, it's an actual process.
It is,
that I just haven't understood the mechanics behind.
Exactly, yeah.
But
because you don't need to.
I don't need to. It's like, why do we say... I went to the beach instead of I go to the beach. I just say went because that's what everyone says.
Exactly.
But there's actually a process or etymology.
Let's talk about that, actually. That's a very good point, because I could ask you the question of why can't I say I go to the beach?
Well, I could argue as a linguistic descriptivist, I like to describe and ask why rather than telling people how to speak. That's just what Gillard Zuckerman taught us. I think it's correct, but...
I agree.
As a year 10 English teacher would scold you.
I completely agree.
Would say, no, we say this, but like...
Why?
Who are you to say that?
Exactly.
It's like the old idea of an apron was once an apron.
Exactly, yeah.
No.
Yeah, no, you're correct. You're right. Yeah, sorry, an apron.
Yeah, an apron.
Yeah.
It just happens. Language changes.
I've got an even better one for that. Have you ever read A Song of Ice and Fire by George R. R. Martin?
Nope.
So he uses a great anachronism, right? I think that's the right word. I hope that's the right word. Where so in all the characters, not all the characters, so some characters that have uncles, right? They call them my nuncle. Nuncle, because it actually is nuncle. Actually is nuncle. It's this day and age, if I went up to my uncle and I said, hey, nuncle, I would get called incorrect, right? But the issue is that 500 years ago, in sort of, as we're kind of going from Middle English to Modern English, nuncle was correct, and it's the exact same phenomenon that you just described, where people were saying, nuncle, that they mishear as an uncle, so the word now becomes uncle. Because it's actually the rule. Like, so what happens again is that it's a good example that you brought up, right? That we don't know the rules of language. We just repeat what we hear. I know the rule of language is that an appears before
like a vowel.
A vowel, yeah. So when I hear an uncle, back then, obviously, you don't have writing, so you're not writing down an uncle. All you're doing is you're saying an uncle, an uncle, an uncle, an uncle, and your brain reinterprets that as an uncle. So then you start saying uncle.
And then you have all these almost unattainable factors that are almost impossible with current computing to be able to analyze what affecting what. It's like, why does that happen? Well, culture, accent, dialect, pidgin. You've got cultures, like food. You've got all these different factors that are contributing to this change.
There is 4 main reasons that we have identified at the moment.
Okay.
And again, I don't remember exactly, but they are... What are they? There is a model for language shift. Due to
Great Semantic Shift or whatever that happened.
Great Vowel Shift is specifically one example of language shift that we could attribute to many things, maybe even the 4 reasons that I wanted to bring up, but they include psycholinguistic reasoning, like lapses in memory. It's very simple as... it's difficult. Maybe let's look it up, because I don't want to just spitball and get it incorrect.
Get my laptop out, but
yeah.
You don't want to look it up?
Just search for... It's honestly, you can find it on Wikipedia. You can just search like language change mechanism, maybe. You can Google that.
Language change. Actually, what we'll do, we'll look this up and get back to you guys in 1 second. We've had some looking. Seems like we can't really find it. But we've had a bit of a break, a bit of a refresher.
Yeah.
But
it's irrelevant anyway. I don't need to necessarily get into the nitty-gritty.
Well,
right?
One thing that I do want to say, though, which I find really, really funny, and Vsauce, credit to him, have you heard... I actually told Dr. Ian Green about this, and he says he's going to use it from now on in his syntax classes, how you can make long sentences using, I guess, adjective and describing nouns. So, for example, the police. Have you heard this one?
The police.
It's like the police, right? Who are they? They're the police that police the police, right?
Who watches the watchman?
Yeah, so it's like the police. So the people that... The police that police the police.
Yeah.
Police. The police. It's actually really confusing. You can write a syntax tree. If I have the time, I'll make one. But it's actually, you can go, okay, here's the clause, here's the adjective that describes the police that are policing the police, who actually are policing the police's police.
Yeah, I have another good one that I like when I bring up with this example. So we can, in English, there are sometimes where we will repeat words due to the rules of grammar.
Okay.
Had is a good example when we look at the past perfect tense as well as the past tense conjugation of to have, right? So I had a cake, right? I had a cake. So let's pretend...
Yeah, what's up with that?
There's a good example. So let's pretend that I'm in a classroom. I'm that year 10 English teacher that you brought up before. And she's saying, all right, class, which is correct? Is it had or had, right? And she asked James and Bob. And then the story goes, is that James, while Bob had, and was more correct. So the way that you can just keep doing some of that, yeah. And do you see?
Well, I had one.
Yeah, I had one.
Well, I had one.
I personally struggle with is something that I would bring up that's interesting, and I would implore you all to notice whether you do it or not, and see and feel out for what feels more correct. Right? Is that the thing? Is that I'm going out tomorrow?
Yeah, I'll put a column when I text.
Yeah,
that.
So do I. But it doesn't feel right to me. The thing is, I'm going out tomorrow. But that doesn't sound right, does it?
The thing is, the one thing that I find really funny, and I'm actually struggling to think of it because my English is quite funny when I speak because I'm a funny guy, is that when they did the do-do, I do it.
Yeah.
Do-do. Like people,
I do it.
Like, the people go,
that one's, I think, a bit easier to break down, right?
Yeah.
Is that I do eat, right? The do... Okay. Me and you are arguing that you need to eat more food, mate. And you go, I do eat, right? That do is actually an adverb, and it's modifying, in my example, eat, right? By adding more emphasis to the verb and demonstrating,
do it.
That is what I am doing, right? That's why we say, I do it. I do it.
You do it.
I do. I do.
But and if you look at English literally, it sounds hilarious.
It does.
You're saying, because I poo it.
Let's go back to what I was saying earlier. Your mind can reanalyze what people say and hear things differently because you're not always remembering, yes, he says I, the subject, do, the adverb, do, the verb. Your brain will hear do. What does that mean again? Oh, it means poo. It means do a poo.
Which is quite hilarious.
Which is a very good example to kind of go back to what you were saying about pattern recognition being what propels language. If we take the modern day sort of Chomskyan approach, which is on its way out, Chomsky would argue, no, in your brain, you have got biologically a structure that recognizes
the universal grammar theory.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Your brain will recognize, yes, the subject, yes, the adverb and the verb. It recognizes that naturally. But a modern day thing will go, no, it's just pattern recognition. Let me demonstrate to you. Now this is a bit of a tangent, but it's something that I find interesting. And if you think about it and extrapolate the theory a bit further, you can sort of understand how pattern recognition works in language to propagate language. There is a theory of how language evolved. So if we accept that language...
There's a few. I know one. Do you know one? What theory do you know?
What were you going to say?
The cognitive trade-off hypothesis. Have you heard that one before?
The one where essentially you're saying that we got big brains so that we can speak, but now we can't run as fast as or punch as hard as a gorilla.
The ones that were, weak kind of got dropped out of the tree.
I don't think that necessarily refutes or has a stronger claim to what I'm saying. In fact, it could just support what I'm saying, right? Mm-hmm. So, if we accept evolution as a model and we take back proto-humans, of course, you don't have to accept that this is the case if you don't believe in it. It doesn't necessarily change my dialogue.
Of course.
But at one point, we had people, and I think this is where we get the name from. It's called the...
Homo...
No. The name of the theory is something like the doo-doo caca theory.
No way.
It's some
Joe Rogan stuff right now.
No. This might just be my brain going doo-doo caca as an insult, right? But it's called like the caca theory, maybe.
Okay.
And the caca theory...
Like, we're talking like CAR, like...
No. K-A-K-A.
Okay.
It stipulates that language began like this. A game of Marco Polo between mother and child. I am this proto-human, or I'm a human in nature, whatever you want to argue, right? With my baby.
By God, or
whatever, doesn't matter for the argument of this, for the purposes of this argument. I've got my baby, right? And we don't have language yet. But we can go and make sort of those emotional, like, we'll call them like demonstrations of emotion. Like, when a lion roars or a monkey goes, right? They're demonstrating emotion, right? Mm-hmm. We had
They're
those.
expressing. Yeah.
They're expressing themselves. Yeah. We had that, and we learnt to go with our baby, right? Then, when we let the baby begin, circle of security, go out and explore the world, right? And the baby wants to know that mum is still there, it goes, and mum repeats, that curiosity, right? That curiosity that the baby has will lead it to discovering things that will... And the baby needs to learn somehow, so it points at a microphone. Okay, not a microphone. Let's pretend this is an apple, right? And I'm a little baby, and I go, and mum goes, right? Then I point at a snake, and I go, right, like that. And then the baby goes, means something bad, right? Now I've got another word. I've got words for good and bad. And over time, those differences, right, they slowly compound, because that baby's going to grow up and be a mum or a dad and teach its own kids that.
This is interesting. Yeah. What you're saying here is the inverse in the way that... Okay, I'm going to put a pin in this. I want to share about this thing here. So on my placement, Hakeem and I do Master of Speech Pathology. So we believe this is the modern day linguistics way to be able to help people throughout society. We love it. It's a great idea, great job. And I was working with like a lovely girl. She was 19, non-verbal, level 3 ASD, and has no means of communication. And our job was our long-term goal.
Communication. Can you elaborate? I'm actually
So obviously there's a lot of details that we'll keep, but basically, no means, meaning non-verbal, and there's not even pointing,
not even like
there's
yelling.
A little bit of grunting.
That's
but I'm going to tie in with what you're saying is our goal was literally yes, no. Like, is there any rock solid? Because emotion regulation was a big deal. She didn't have any therapy until she was around 17. So like really late.
Right,
so we know the importance of early intervention, all that kind of stuff. So that was our long-term goal.
Yeah.
And we got lots of progress. We knew music really did help out, and we knew that we ended up playing bubbles, like blowing bubbles, and she had active participation in that. Right. Yeah, it was a great... there was lots of progress. And I did actually ask my placement educator, because, I really wanted to help this girl, and I felt almost helpless. Yeah. Because I didn't have...
It's a very difficult thing to be able to teach someone who for 19 years has relied on their own form of communication.
And obviously, and we're lucky to have Australia, but we have like the NDIS and other government support to be able to facilitate the needs of, the people that need it, which is really good. And that's why I enjoy my job, to help others, and it's a great thing.
Yeah.
Kind of lost my train of thought, but basically our goal was to have that yes, no, and build upon that. Because I asked my PE, I said, well, placement educator, I said, I feel kind of like, I need help more. Like, how can we, like, you know, I'd teach like my partner Japanese and I can learn some words and in a couple of days she's memorized hello and goodbye. But obviously we can't do that. And I'm interested in hear your opinion on this idea, which we can tie it in with
it will tie back a bit, I'm sure.
If you can set a SMART goal, right, and that has great contingencies, and which we learn a lot about, which is we can talk about the benefits of speech pathology with setting goals and reflecting and that kind of stuff. If you can get a slight 1%, 0.1% closer towards a goal with a good contingency, you could argue that there is growth.
Yes.
Because there is growth.
Sure,
and if there is growth, therefore there is progress.
100%.
If there is progress, there is the next stage. Like, the way that I'll articulate it is we have infinity, right? Let's say...
I get where you're coming from.
We have
now.
infinity of like 0, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, all the way into infinity.
Yeah.
We also have...
0,
We also have infinity between 0 and 1.
Yes.
So
I get exactly
count from infinity. So 0.0000. You don't even know where to start.
Can I interject just to make sure I'm understanding? So you're bringing up this sort of steady progression of building up from one step to another to relate back to how language evolves, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so what we're saying is that the ka between mum and son or mum and daughter are compounded over time. And that is exactly correct, right?
And that's
because what we need to consider, is that with the example of the young lady you've just presented, obviously we don't know how she's going at the moment, but I can only assume that once she has learned yes and no, you can...
Theoretically.
It's actually going to get exponentially faster, because not only does she have yes and no now she'll add, let's just say, 2 more branches to her yes and no each. Now, instead of having 2 responses, she has 4.
Exactly.
And then, instead of 4 responses, she'll have 8.
And this is all
exponentially
theoretical at this point. I have no study in this. I'm still a student.
Yeah.
But my theory is, if it's like building a house, it's like there's stages which are prerequisite the other stage. Like we know that...
Yeah, you're right.
Receptive
building
is...
foundations.
Exactly. So you have to have the foundation. So you've got audio processing, number 1. If you can't audio process anything, how, like if that the car theory, if that child can't hear,
you're right, it can't repeat,
it can't progress to the hearing
stage. Exactly why in speech pathology, now this is very good, if any of you listening have kids out there and you're concerned about the acquisition of language of your children, what I recommend, go get their hearing tested. Go get their hearing tested.
100%.
Do you know why your kid is going instead of caterpillar? It's because they can't hear you say cat. They can't hear you say p. Because they can't hear it. They don't know it exists. All they hear is, they hear a very rough thing because their hearing isn't great.
And in their defense, that's what they hear.
They're doing great. They're doing exactly what should be done when it comes to learning language.
And it can be as simple as getting hearings checked and putting little grommets, which are these little pins or little kind of valves that go on your ear, drain the fluid out. Boom. It's gone a bit flat. It's okay.
No one saw that. Put in a picture of Joe Rogan.
Yeah, so I find that... So it was a really learning opportunity for me to learn that if there is progress, which, some weeks there aren't, some weeks there are, in any development, you can kind of compound those growths to achieve the goal. And that's why goal setting is so important. 100%. And vice versa with us as humans.
Let's use a more realistic example to give a bit of a tangent. I think that a really great example for that, again, is simply going to the gym, right? Because when you begin going to the gym, right, and you can only do, let me think, 5 kilo lateral raise, right? You can only maybe chest press 12 kilos to begin with, right? You can't do a bench press. The issue is that once you get to 25 kilos on the chest press, but maybe your biceps aren't strong enough, or your triceps or your shoulders aren't strong enough yet to support the bar, you're still not going to be able to do a chest press, right? You need to build up all these foundational fundamental skills to be able to move on to the next stage, even though it just seems like it's a clear progression from A to B. It's not. You need to build up all these foundations and, all this pseudo-bro science about stabilizers and whatever to be able to get to the next stage, which, is explosive.
Which we have that in evidential paper, like pre-linguistic skills.
Exactly,
These are prerequisite in order to get to this next stage.
Yes.
And that...
So let's add to that just to give context to whoever's watching. Pre-linguistic skills, they're very interesting in speech pathology. If you've ever been to a speech pathologist, if you've ever seen speech pathology, especially with younger children, you may wonder why speech pathologists just sit there and blow bubbles. How is that teaching language. Shouldn't they be sitting there and going A, B, C, D?
And this is evidence-based, and you will now speak, and then tomorrow you speak.
And it works, though, because what blowing bubbles does is it teaches children, I should pay attention to where things come from, because one of the foundational, exactly pre-linguistic skills is joint attention. It's paying attention.
Turn taking.
Because let's have a conversation where I'm not paying attention.
Hakeem, how you going, mate? Hey, look over here. We've got a pen over here. We've got a pen over here. Hello.
We can't have a conversation. We can't have a conversation, right?
Now, there's a caveat in that. There is some sort of, and this is another issue we talk about.
Yeah.
Westernized idea of correct communication.
That's a really, really good point. So we can contrast that, of course, with another way that Indigenous Australians communicate, which dialogue. Is through, it's called social broadcasting.
That's right.
And unfortunately, a lot of Australians may interpret social broadcasting as sort of antisocial behaviour.
Appropriate. Yeah.
But it's not. It's actually very interesting. Right? I actually want to build on that.
Talk about Ridley Scott. Not Ridley Scott. What's his name?
Scott.
Dr. Scott something.
I don't know.
Dang it.
I can give you an example. So, a few ways that Indigenous Australians or First Nations Australians communicate is social broadcasting, which is essentially, I'm just going for a walk and talking about how I feel. You're just getting it out there. You're just talking. I don't care if anyone's listening. I'm just saying what I want. And people can hear that and just interpret and understand. And what's even more interesting about that is that it plays into another sort of way that Indigenous Australians communicate, which is, again, it really, really shows that the way that we speak is actually just westernized, and it's not intrinsic in any way, that the space in between dialogue doesn't have to be as it is with us. I ask you a question, Lewis. I say, Lewis, what's the weather like right now?
What's the weather like right now? Okay. It's hot. It's like,
why did you feel like you had to respond that quickly?
Social norms.
Exactly, social norms. An Indigenous Australian, right?
Well, this is what this guy, I gotta find the paper, but he had, he had this thing where it's like, learning the language. I'm not sure what language it was. What is that bird called?
Oh, that's right, yeah.
Blank face.
Yeah, and then 3 days later.
It was like weeks later.
He just gives the answer.
Out of nowhere. So imagine we were at a cafe.
Yeah.
Or I said to Hakeem, what's your favourite colour? And you give me a blank face. A week later, we're bowling. Completely different thing. And he just goes, blue. Out of nowhere. We're sitting, he just goes, blue. And I go, what? And you go, blue, Lewis. That's, blue. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, that's my favourite colour. Like, that is to the extent
that we can wait,
that it's,
And intrinsically, you can make an argument that's a great way of speaking. Because that demonstrates to me that I've really, really been paying attention to what you asked me, and I really wanted to give you a good answer. Right?
And obviously this can be like, what is your theory of the meaning of life? Like,
that's
obviously, like, if you took that away for 2 weeks, like, that's a respect.
That's an essay.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's due date,
of course. Yeah. And that's like the social norms that we're talking about. So it's very fascinating.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. So social norms do play a big part in communication of language, right? As we were going back to again what you said at the very start of this, that culture is a part of language. This is a very good demonstration of what we mean by that, because language is not just me flapping my gums and me blowing air out of my mouth and using my tongue to shape the sounds. That's
well, to some level, to some extent.
Yes. That's that's the lion's share of what is
like. You've got the IPA, like we know that no other sounds can be created.
Of course, yes,
but it's more than just that.
That's not just what language is. We go back to what speech pathology is: joint attention, the pre-linguistic joint attention, eye contact, turn taking. This is my favourite one: turn taking.
The individual's goals, all these things of what they want to get out of it, as well as the linguistic skills.
Yes, that's another thing. I think that just the way that speech pathology works rather than language. But if we look back at turn taking, another thing that speech pathologists do is you get a young child that is delayed and you push a bowl to them, right? And then when they push it back, you go, yay, good job, right? And the kid goes, wow, it feels really good when I take turns. And that teaches them that when they speak, they should take turns as well. Because we can't have a conversation that's one-sided. Let's try to speak.
Hello, man.
I don't care. No, shut up. Shut up. No, that's a really bad example, right?
No, I know what you mean.
But you know what I mean?
Off and you're
I can just talk and go, no, I don't care what you want. I want to go eat a pizza right now.
I want the ball. I don't want to share it. This is my ball.
Yeah, that's an even better example. That's a more realistic example. Because that takes away from that intrinsic human idea of needing to cooperate, right?
Gratitude,
cooperation, I believe, is the heart of humanity. It's one of the things that makes us human, right? And language is embedded within that, and language needs cooperation to function. Because again, it doesn't work for me to just talk over you and just talk about myself, right? That will get me isolated from you. That will get me rejected from you. What was the point of me talking then? If all I get is bad and I get hurt by that. We need to learn to take turns. Otherwise, people aren't going to learn. And the thing is that if we need to learn to take turns as well, I need to learn to take turns so I can learn the words that you know. I don't know every word. I don't know how to pronounce every word. Do you know what I mean? Like, what's a really difficult word to pronounce? Like,
negligible is very hard to pronounce.
Negligible, really? Do you find it hard? I think it's when you speed up the word negligible, it does become hard, doesn't it?
Negligible.
But like, the gl is a bit
negligible.
Hard. Let's break this down. This is fun. Here's a fun activity for everyone watching at home. Why is negligible for Lewis difficult to pronounce? What do you think? I'm saying put a timer here. 5 seconds. You're out of time. Okay, so negligible. My theory would be is let's break down the word negligible. Right? We have neg. Put neg here, and then lidge, and then stop there. That's all we need to do. Because I would argue that say negligible fast.
Negligible. I'm actually good.
You're thinking about it too much. I think is the
negligible.
Issue. Okay, maybe I'm just making too much of an assumption here that I would assume you'd say it more like negligible.
No, negligible. I probably think about it too much. I just know that's a hard word.
Okay, my theory would be as to why, so I'll bring it up anyway, is that the GL structure, how many words does it actually occur in where it's in the middle of a word in English, generally?
Negligible, yeah.
A negligible amount, alright? Go on Word Hippo, look at GL occurring in the median position, occurring in the final position, in any position but the front. Glamour, glitz, glue, glob. That's far more common for you to pronounce it at the start of a syllable rather than in the middle of 2 syllables. Negligible, right? So what your brain does is it goes, I'm going to combine those together, right? And then the negl at the end of a syllable, no one says that. So the brain goes, let's reduce this to what's easier for me to pronounce, which is negligible or negligible.
Negligible.
Exactly. And then
negligible.
Again, these are all things that your brain will do subconsciously to make the word easier to pronounce. It's not lazy. A lot of people will call this lazy. How is that lazy? That's innovative. That's new.
Look, what kids do this all the time. Yeah, exactly. They are the pioneers of language change.
Let's go. Exactly.
Helicopter.
Exactly.
Why would you say helicopter? Just say helicopter.
They're right. It's like why wouldn't you? It's like that meme from The Office where he says, "Why say many word when a few word do trick?" He's right.
It's like
I'm communicating more efficiently.
Hippopotamus.
Yeah.
Why hippopotamus?
At this point,
of course. But like,
that's a good example, yeah. If the word hippo didn't exist, why don't we just hippopotamus?
Well, like weak syllable deletion is obviously the phenomenon I'm talking about.
Exactly,
but like, people do that naturally. Exactly. Australian, we have all these other different things that we do, blah, blah, blah.
Weak syllable deletion may be what's underlying the difficulty of negligible as well. It's negligible. It's negligible. Why can't I say negligible?
Or neggle.
Yeah.
This is just neggle.
Well, that sounds like other words, like negling. Is that a word? Put up the definition. Like definition. Wait, what is that word? No, that doesn't matter. Okay, I promised that I'd talk about Chomsky and how he is wrong. So let's talk about that. I don't want to get off topic because that's frustrating because people who have tuned in probably know Chomsky, probably know that he is, the forefather of linguistics. And I'm saying he's wrong. Let me demonstrate to you why he's wrong.
Okay, look, I'm non-biased.
ChatGPT. ChatGPT, right? It's right. Modern, it's contemporary, it's vogue, right? When we talk about ChatGPT, as a language model, which is exactly what ChatGPT is, as we were discussing earlier, ChatGPT refutes a lot of what Chomsky said.
Okay.
Chomsky believes, as I said earlier, that language comes from a biological sort of source, right? It's a neurological phenomenon, you could say almost. It's something in your brain that is intrinsic, and when you break it down, when you ask why do we have this, the answer is simply because we understand language generatively. Our grammar is in our brain, universal sort of
you can argue
linguistic
because
crimes.
We are the only conscious, we're the only ones that have language, therefore we must be the only ones that have this thing.
That's exactly what Chomsky would argue.
Yeah.
I could instantly refute that with a bunch of examples. Mushrooms can speak. Bees can speak.
Oh, with what?
Dolphins. Mushrooms.
It depends on what parameters you define speech.
You're right. You're very good. Let's talk about that, right? What is the definition of speech that I'm using to break this down is that I would say communicating ideas. That's that simple. It doesn't need to be as abstract as we can do. We can discuss philosophy. We can discuss what I'm going to do in the future. These are really abstract.
And talk about the past.
That's crazy. Mushrooms, however, can communicate, I'm sick. Send me more, resources. I'm infected by something, and I need you to allocate your energy to me. What it does. This is awesome. The what's it called? The mycelial network, right? Mm-hmm. So the mycelium, for context, the mycelium is sort of the roots of a mushroom. Let's just break down.
And they have the ones that the Tokyo things.
Yeah, exactly like that. And they intertwine with each other, right? And they exist, and that's the organism. The mushrooms are just their seeds, right?
Yeah.
But we'll just call them mushrooms for now. The mycelium sends electrical impulses, right, in patterns to other parts of the mycelial network, right? That part of the mycelium will interpret and send back more electrical impulses in certain rhythms and waves that communicate ideas.
Wow.
There is a rhythm and a wave that you send that means I'm sick. And there's one that says, I don't have the energy to allocate to you, and it talks to another one. And that one goes, I have got the ability to allocate energy so we can get rid of the bacteria that's infected you. And they do that, and then the mushroom gets rid of the infection. Wow. It talks, right?
It communicates.
It communicates, yeah. It's not human.
Now, when you say, I don't want to get super nitty-picky, but like, that's communication, not speech.
I would argue that speech is the...
in the speech pathology definition of speech.
Good. Because in a sort of everyday context, humans will use speech and language interchangeably. In speech pathology, we define speech as the production of sound. It's more of a mechanical thing. It's more of like an acoustic thing, a music thing almost, right? The production of the sound ch is made up of t and sh mechanically.
Affricate.
Right? And affricate, yeah. Ch is made of the sound. A child may find it difficult to make both those sounds at the same time. So they might say, instead of let's say chit-chat, they'll say tit-tat. That's a very typical child way of speaking.
Or shishat, maybe. They
don't say it like that. But they very well may.
And linguistics is a crazy thing.
What you need to do is you need to identify why it is that they're actually saying ch as sh or t. There are many reasons. It could be, back to what I was saying about hearing, it could be to do with literally their tongue can't move. That's called speech, okay? Speech, I'm not using speech in that context. I am using
communication.
In the sense of communication. It's only that because humans can speak and because hearing is processed faster than any other sense in our body, naturally we're inclined probably to use our lovely...
Is that true?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
But eyes, speed of light.
Nope. We process hearing faster. That's why...
Interesting.
That's why when you're at a crossing in Australia, rather than looking at the green to red or red to green, and you hear put in Billie Eilish, that part of the song. Put that in. That part, you actually respond faster by hearing it. Or if you're playing a video game, sound cues are more powerful than visual cues. You process audio before you can process sight.
Interesting.
I would argue
despite that light is faster than sound.
Yeah,
it's just our processing power.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So maybe with Neuralink we could upgrade that to the new light speed, light vision interpretation.
But that would completely change the way that we communicate. It would make sign language even more powerful, right? Because you can communicate faster than me speaking to you.
Well, the only issue would be the GPU of your hands to be able to
complete the because fast. We're not fine-tuned to communicate with our hands. We're
like if it was like if we could sign, because you know how they have like how fast can you read, and then like they put the words as fast as you can. They'll probably just be like that, but with signs.
Exactly. Anyway, that's a bit of we diverge from the.
No, that's all good.
Chomsky. So Chomsky argues back to that idea of generative grammar, that language is embedded within our brain. However, ChatGPT demonstrates to us that is incorrect. That's not actually correct at all.
Put the paper up to prove our thoughts on this.
Yeah, it's
not just fallacy.
Put the paper here. It's from a very recent, I think a PhD student, 2023, where he's discussing, because I don't want to plagiarize him, we should give him credit. So I don't remember his name. Read this paper. It's very good. And again, it's essentially saying that we use ChatGPT, right? And you open ChatGPT.
We don't use, but...
Wait, what do you mean?
I'm kidding.
We use ChatGPT to generate this entire podcast. In fact, I'm not even speaking. This is all AI generated. And you fell for it because this is exactly how ChatGPT works, right? It looks real. So if it speaks realistically and it responds realistically, for all intents and purposes, it's communicating, right? It's not back to what I was saying with predictive text. It's not just saying like a chat bot. It's not reading 3 words and saying, the next 3 words fit the pattern. No, it's actually...
It's not bonjour, je m'appelle Louis.
It's not storing information. It's making modifications to the language. It goes back to what I was saying about agreement. It can agree with things. It can go back to what you're saying with diaxis, right? It can understand words contextually. I can say to ChatGPT, right, make 3 new sentences that sound like this, right? Whoa. And it'll go, what does this mean? And it will interpret what this means. And it will give you an accurate response, right? Because the thing is, right, and the thing is, it doesn't know what this means. It only is making a guess what this means based off of all the information it's got, where it has seen that this
And you could
the word
argue...
this means look back at what I've just said and work out what this means based on context. And it has learnt that.
And guess
it does
what?
work.
You could actually argue that is what humans do.
That is exactly correct.
We go, what is this? And then we compute from our language data bank in our head and go, I wonder what this is.
That's really good.
And then you ask a prompt to the next person, say, can you elaborate? You elaborate on ChatGPT, you elaborate in human flesh.
Yeah. If you look back sort of at the norms for kids, a kid that is 2 years old, that for all intents and purposes can communicate very basic needs, back to similar situation to the mushrooms, right? Like the 2-year-old kid is a mushroom. They don't know what this means. They're not good at learning context yet because they haven't had enough exposure to what this can actually mean. They might know that this means point and say the funny sound, but they've got no clue how to use it contextually until they grow older and older and older and they've heard this used in that many contexts, right? That they've acquired the meaning of this as a dialectical sort of contextual marker. That's exactly what ChatGPT does, which goes exactly against Chomsky, who would say, no, you have a part in your brain that demonstrates this, and it knows that there is like a need for context. There will be a word that fills the need for context.
That's obviously grammar, or is that abstract thought?
That's really good. Again, so Chomsky will argue they're the same thing.
Okay,
that language represents thought. Let me give you a counterexample. Again, drawing from this paper, right? I have aphasia. And again, if you don't know what aphasia is, essentially what that means, it means the complexity in your language processing. There are many different kinds of aphasia.
Global...
Wernicke's and Broca's, which we're
fluent, disfluent.
We're phasing away out of those.
Yeah, it's more fluent and disfluent aphasia.
But, for example, there's a really good video I like of a guy that he understands perfectly. The rhythm of his language is amazing.
Prosody,
it's perfect.
everything's good.
Everything's perfect except for the words he says, right? All he can say is tono. And he goes, tono, 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 right? And what's really interesting, sorry, this is a bit of just a tangent again, but what's really interesting is when you say, please look at your fingers and count, he goes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, tono, 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 and he gives up. Because he knows he's saying tono, but his brain, due to the aphasia, causes him to produce tono. But what I'm trying to get at with this example is that, but he's got reasoning, he's got the ability to count, he's got interpretation of things in his mind. He has everything except the ability to produce meaningful language. You could argue that it is meaningful because he can probably express himself, again, going back to that sort of rudimentary sort of proto-language of his emotion. He can probably go, tono! Right? And express that he's angry. So I would argue
so you're saying, like, the meaning isn't in Toro, it's in the way that he delivers it.
Yeah, in this context, yeah. But this is an example of aphasia. The point being is that he's not producing language. If you talk to ChatGPT and he said, ChatGPT, why am I sad? And it just said, tono, 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 tono. You would go, this thing is useless. But the thing is that guy is making language, right? Even though it's not perfect. And that demonstrates, right, that language is more than just being able to speak. It talks about how it's reasoning, how it's interpretation, how it's those pre-linguistic skills we were mentioning earlier, right?
I guess one thing that I just thought of, do you have to throw the baby out with the bathwater in the sense of, like, I'll try and defend Chomsky's theory here. We've got the idea that universal grammar theory, it's all intrinsic to humans or whatever with thought.
And you would argue... Sorry.
I would argue in the same way that a dog with 3 legs is still a dog, that a person that has issues like Toro, Toro, Toro is still under that banner.
Yeah, they are. They are. It's that aphasia has complexities. It's a very complex thing. It's not just black and white, of course. It's not just language or no language.
So do you think that with ChatGPT...
The issue is that with that, right, it's demonstrating that with language, it's actually independent from reasoning. It has nothing to do... Like, in his brain, he isn't just going, tono, tono, tono. He's probably going, crap, where's my pen? Oh, shit, where is it?
But because that's the whole point of aphasia.
Exactly, that's right. And that demonstrates that, okay, so his language actually doesn't really have anything to do with his thought, right? Chomsky would say, no, it does. His language is his thought. No, it's wrong. And then we go back to ChatGPT.
But that's due to aphasia, though.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is the one-legged, three-legged dog.
It requires more...
nuance.
Yeah, it does. It requires more investigation. And I don't know that much about aphasia. I would love to know more about aphasia. Aphasia is very interesting to me. But I don't know enough, really, to be able to comment on it. But that's kind of what the paper was getting at, to demonstrate that thought and language are independent from one another. That aphasic patients can still demonstrate everything independent of language in their mind, that Chomsky would say, no. They're the same thing intrinsically, as far as I understand Chomsky. Now, I only bring that up because now we look back at ChatGPT, right? ChatGPT doesn't necessarily need to be able to reason to speak, because the argument goes that reasoning as a means of thought and language production are independent. They have nothing to do with each other. It's just pattern recognition. Mm-hmm. So that's why ChatGPT can tell you what this means. Even though when you think about it, that's a very contextual word. It's the same as like if I speak to you in another language, like if I go ichi, like tochimiku, like if I just speak to you without any context, I'm speaking Persian. Like daily dialect of Persian. For context, you got no idea what I'm saying to you, right? But I can teach you that language through context. We're going to learn. We're going to do a live example of teaching Lewis Persian. I may have done this example on you before in the past, so you may be familiar.
It's okay.
But if I say estodshu, I'm telling you to do something, right?
Okay, this is going to be really random. Yeah, is it stand up?
It is stand up. Yeah.
Yes,
have I done this before?
Never.
Really?
Oh, I've never.
Estodshu. Okay, this is a bit of enough. He got a really good guess here. But now I say bishin.
Well, okay. Clearly, I have no idea what that means, but it's the opposite of stand up. Which is sit down.
Okay, good. All right, okay. That's really good. Now I'm going to say ibigid.
You just looked to the floor?
Ibigid.
So I have no idea. It could mean lie on the ground.
Now, let me add context to support your learning. Ibigid. Very good. Nice. Perfect. I said, take this.
Oh, I thought it was, yeah, I don't know.
Like it's good.
I know, a TED Talk, I can link that TED Talk did exactly the same thing.
This would be sort of...
It was it would be like, Mimi Kuchi, like it'd speak about that in Japanese, but if I said it to you on your own,
Mimi Kuchi,
you'd be like this, like, Kore wa Mimi, and then like, Kono pen ga kirei.
It's like, I get it. It's like if I said, Ore no hana doko?
Yeah. It's like, where is my nose?
Exactly, yeah. Right, if you don't know because you speak Japanese, right? But if I went to someone and I said, Ore no hana doko? Like, that's how you speak to a kid, right?
Exactly.
Where's my nose? The kid learns that way, and that's exactly how language works. This is really good, and again, I'm not going to get into it, but again, I would implore you, if you're learning a language, use Stephen Krashen's model of language acquisition. It doesn't follow Chomsky's model at all, right? Stephen Krashen says, you will learn language through context. Going back to ChatGPT learns language context. And it learns it through context, right? Chomsky says language models like ChatGPT are not language. But all the proof is kind of going, and in the speech pathology, they say use evidence-based practice. The evidence is kind of demonstrating that ChatGPT is learning a language. So we learn it in the same way as ChatGPT, right? Which is only compounding patterns. Not Chomsky's universal theory of grammar. Let's bring up another example. The Piraha people of South America.
Here we go.
The Piraha people of South America, they do not have certain linguistic phenomena in their language that we have in our languages that Chomsky argues is necessary for language. That he argues is part of your brain.
There's a bit of politics involved here, wasn't there?
There is a bit of politics involved here, but this is the drama. There was a Christian missionary. In fact, I think at the time, he may have not actually even been Christian. I don't remember exactly. No, sorry, my bad. He was a Christian missionary that became a linguist. That's right. I was going to say he's a linguist that became a Christian missionary. That doesn't really make sense. He goes to the Piraha people. For context, the Piraha people are a very small tribe around the Amazon, in Brazil, I believe. He goes to them and... Sorry.
Just in case the audio gets a bit cringe.
And he wishes to... You know more about being a missionary than I do, of course. I suppose he wants to spread the gospel to these people.
The truth,
Yeah. And... in order to do that, he must learn Piraha. And I'm guessing, again, I'm not an expert in the situation, he wasn't a linguist at the time, but he probably wanted to learn it really well. So
or he could have been passionate about language and that led him to go to a more remote community, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, whatever the idea is, right?
He wanted to go there.
Maybe he read Chomsky, I don't know exactly. And eventually what he learned was that the Piraha language doesn't follow everything that Chomsky argues is universal, right? Chomsky hated that. Chomsky went out of his way to ban him. He used his power to get him banned from ever seeing them again. That's insane. He pulled strings to stop this missionary from seeing the Piraha people. And this guy had spent years of his life living with them. His wife divorced him. He almost got killed twice by the Piraha people. That's how passionate he was about living with them. And Chomsky stopped him from going back because the Piraha... the idea refuted what Chomsky said. Now, let me play the devil's advocate. I'll get into that in a second. Let me just play the devil's advocate. Chomsky may have been correct. This guy's not a trained linguist. He's a missionary. he may have been misunderstanding the data, and that's exactly what Chomsky said. He said he's actually hurting these people by going based off of his assumptions, based off his feelings, rather than using evidence-based to demonstrate and document their language. But I'm not convinced by that. Okay? I've never read the paper. I've never read his work. There could be some credence to what has been argued. There may not be. I don't know for sure, right? But let's just go based off what I understand, okay? And that is that the two fundamental parts of language that I remember that the Piraha language disputed was one, counting.
They had no math.
That's fine. Maths is a very, very,
numbers.
long...
Well, you need numbers.
Number concepts, exactly, yeah. And I've got another very good example from Australia. Indigenous languages don't have numbers either, right? In fact...
They also don't have left, right, up, down, some of them.
Yeah, they don't.
Crazy. Yeah.
And now back to what we were talking about before, we misunderstood as diaxis. I think it's like an embedded clause. I wish I remember the exact name. It's embarrassing that I don't remember the exact name. But the ability to continuously go, she said that, he said that, I said that, Ian said that, Bob said that, I went to the shops that were over there, that, and you can go that.
I'm pretty sure it's...
Forever. It's like called like embedded or something. It's just put the definition here. Right there, that's what it's called.
You have to find that.
What do you mean? You can just Google it. You got a degree in linguistics as well.
Okay, fine.
No, okay. So, but that doesn't exist in Piraha. Piraha cannot do that. Piraha cannot go, he said that, they said that. The language doesn't work like that. I don't know why. I'm not a Piraha expert. I'm not the missionary. I'm not Chomsky. All I know is that apparently the Piraha language cannot do that.
Which goes against traditional language theory or
which
his
is
idea
exactly what Chomsky says, is that the power of language is that it is forever embedded within itself infinitely.
But if that's the case, language changes, it shits. We've got thou, thus, this.
Yes, okay. But
language changes. Why did they not change?
They probably have, but that's the thing.
Well, yeah.
Now, this kind of touches on a very touchy subject, right? Of talking about the complexity of a language.
And then you get the cultural biases, and I'm saying this from a platform of this is how I function, so therefore they should.
If we argue with a sort of let's call it an efficiency model.
Okay.
Language isn't going to make innovations to discuss things that are non-existent. Right? I'm not going to sit here and talk to you about something that... I'm not going to...
Why should I have a word for muons when I have no necessary astrophysics?
Exactly, yeah, exactly. Why would you use the word, I have auto-predictive text on my iPhone 15 when your everyday life is about going, I need to go into the jungle and find food?
The only word that I could know without that context is I.
Yeah.
Or I have. Maybe I have is it.
Yeah.
I have auto-predictive text. What's that?
Yeah.
On. Maybe on. And then
none of those words are meaningful when you are a hunter-gatherer.
It's literally me saying, I have boogity 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 on my boogity boogity.
Exactly, yeah.
But obviously it's not consistent or whatever.
That's sort of... So the Piraha people who have existed as hunter-gatherers for generations, their language has been shifting using those mechanisms that we tried to find earlier, like the misunderstandings, like and nuncle. Their phonology has been changing constantly. The words, the innovations they make in words probably has been changing constantly. Mm-hmm. In fact, I can give another tangent and discuss exactly using an African language that I'm familiar with, where they demonstrated how content words, how what we would call words that are meaningful, like microphone, pen, can actually evolve into grammatical words. Like, for. This is for you. We didn't just one day, going back to that example I gave of the car, go, kaka, for kaka. Like, if I just started saying a new grammatical relationship between content words, it's not going to make any sense. Like, if I start saying, Lewis, you're going to schnesh on... I don't know, schnesh is a verb, isn't it? It's very hard to kind of just innovate this, isn't it?
So you're creating a verb right now.
Lewis, I'm trying to make a preposition. Lewis, you're going to eat schnesh my phone. What the hell does schnesh mean? I could say eat on my phone, eat at my phone, eat in my phone. Obviously, these are all meaningless sentences, but you can see the syntactic principle here.
It's like, where did the prepositions come from? Like, why?
Let me demonstrate to you how prepositions evolve using an African language. What they did was over time, and you can actually still see this kind of transitioning, is that when they give something for your benefit, this is called the benefactory case, right? For, what they have done is they use the word gift. Like gift money, again, I don't remember exactly. If I can find the paper, we can pull the exact example here. But they just use the word. They use a physical word. They have an idea of giving gifts in their language, right? Over time, the physical gift is becoming a metaphor.
Like the noun became a preposition.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, or a postposition, however it works in their language. It's become a grammatical item.
Interesting.
I don't know why I brought that. Why did I bring that up?
It makes sense.
Yeah, no, but that's exactly sort of how language shifts in that meaning. So back to what Pirha was saying.
We're talking about Pirha and Chomsky and all that kind of stuff.
So back to Chomsky. And now the whole idea of why I brought up Pirha, right, is that if we accept that Pirha refutes Chomsky's grammatical theory, well, then it's not universal.
It's not universal grammar theory.
So it's wrong.
It's if you have 4 legs and you're a dog, grammar theory.
What I really do believe in is that a lot of linguistics is Western.
Chomsky's there's so many issues with that. That's why I just want to jump in. Like, it kind of rubs my gears because for me, learning, and this is going to sound really funny if the audience is purely linguistic, but if you're not, could be a learning experience for you. I play basketball.
Yeah.
Right? And if I recorded it, this is me before I knew any linguistics. I play basketball and I record a Japanese person. Let's say, I'll just pretend it's gibberish so we both know what it is. Sure. It'd be gubbity, gubbity, gubbidaba. Alright? Gubbity, gubbity, gubbidaba. So I'd go, okay, so gubbity must mean I, and then gubbity must mean play, and then gubbida must mean basketball because how I speak, how everyone must speak.
Oh, you think it's a one-to-one correlation?
Yeah, I never thought that.
Well, why don't you actually just bring up, you said that in Japanese, which would be basketball shimasu.
Yeah, right. Exactly, okay. And that's even to an advanced extent. Yeah. Watashi wa, they admit the subject. Yeah, exactly. Which is actually crazy. So hard to explain that I play basketball is literally basketball play in a different language. Where they've got these particles.
Not just basketball play. I would interject here that it gets insane, right? Because the particle you're bringing up, right? We don't have that in English.
Exactly.
We don't have that in English.
Languages out there, I'll tell everyone if that has completely monolingual, is insane. And we know that languages have kind of levels in their severity due to the language you know. Because people go, what is the hardest language? And I go, what do you speak? And if you speak English, Mandarin, Korean,
that's
Arabic.
Great. Yeah, that's great.
Japanese.
Yeah, you're right.
If you speak French, English is going to be easy for you.
Yeah, right. If you speak Japanese, Korean is a lot easier.
And my theory is purely due to the grammatical syntax understanding. Because now, imagine teaching the to someone that has no idea.
That's hard.
People that speak English for native speakers struggle to explain what a preposition is.
Yeah.
It took me a linguistic degree to figure out what even a preposition was and when to use it in a syntax tree when I'm making it done. It just gets complicated.
Yeah. That's really good, right? Because why is it easier for a Japanese person to learn something that's grammatically similar to Japanese rather than something that's grammatically further away? Pattern recognition.
And this is...
It's that simple.
So imagine this, right? We have linguistics, right? So we know maths is the language of the universe. I can agree with that, right? So that's kind of literally what Chomsky wanted language to be.
Yeah.
However, knowing that Japanese, Arabic, French, English are so different in so many different aspects from the example I play basketball, imagine, and this is going to sound very fun to explain, imagine if the Pirahã people invented linguistics as we know it today. Their, biases in their social norms,
right, in their own understanding of language.
Their own understanding would be so different to ours.
It would
because now we've created these social norms.
That's exactly what
when
I mean.
we get an Indigenous Australian in court, they must reply and testify when they're open into their understanding of... They might reply in 2 weeks' time, but our society has edged them into this box.
That's perfect,
which is what linguistics have kind of had this bias
Linguistics, when we start from the get-go, because we are enclosed within that, that Western dialect. Sorry, what should I say? Dialectical? Is that the right word?
Western
dialogue, that's the word I mean. The Western dialogue, right? From the get-go, no one ever questions... How long can we have between conversations? Because you go to Greece, you go to England, you go to Scandinavia, you go to Russia, right? You go to Morocco, you go to Saudi Arabia, you go to Iran, right? You go to all these places, right? And all of them go, you just respond instantly, right? So why would I ever go, yes, linguistics must also incorporate this thing? Because there's no reason to think about it.
Unbiased evidence-based approach, which... There's linguisticses in the sense of
you're right,
there's different...
You're right.
I don't know what they call it, little boats of understanding.
Yeah, no, you're definitely right.
Yeah.
And the issue is that Chomsky's models
were trying to box it all into one.
Exactly, because he is using too many, as I believe, Western biases. His universal grammar rules completely correct in every Western languages. How far has a Western language come and stayed within its own environment, right, to become what it is today since the time of going... Again, do you know what I mean?
And it's the reality is, linguistics only exists because we want it to.
Yeah.
We've just invented this idea and understanding nature. Obviously, you've got absolutes like the IPA and all that kind of stuff. But when culture, food,
that's
okay. I understand. Not absolutes, but I mean like the bilabial plosive.
Yeah.
Like we know that that's a thing.
It is, right? But if you
challenge me, I'm here to learn.
Look at something like a what do they call, like a sonogram?
Okay, right. And it hurts. Like you have to bring it back to math. Is what you're saying?
Yeah, if you look at what a sound actually is, the bilabial plosive can be realised in so many different ways. That's right? True. So
you're saying the IPA is an attempt to linguisticify the mathematical understanding of which sounds are made.
And again, it's Western bias, right? Because it's very Western bias. When you look at an English example of something written in IPA, clear as, you could probably guess how, like, put a word here, right? Put
apple.
Apple. Put that there, right?
Apple. It's like
It's the right? Or in our dialect, we use a w. Fun fact. South Australians.
Well, I'm Melbourne. Milk. I pronounce my L's.
So it's milk. Anyway, now get a word, right, from an Alaskan indigenous language and put it here, and it's gibberish in comparison to how nice and clear Apple is, right? Because the sounds that they make that are perfectly valid in their Alaskan languages, right? To them, they go, yeah, that's...
It's like we did phonology in our linguistic degree. We can read IPA, but I would struggle to read a Mandarin pitch, tone, long word.
Yeah, exactly.
Because
people that develop the systems to be easy and rational speak the languages we speak. And it's not a bad thing. I'm not blaming anyone, right? It just is what it is.
And unfortunately, we have to try and come unbiased, but the reality is we'll always have a bias.
Exactly.
Clearly me thinking the IPA was kind of universal, which reality is it is, but it's an attempt.
From your point of view, right? From your word, if we use that Pirahara example of we only do language that's necessary and knowledge that is necessary to our everyday work, why isn't IPA acceptable and universal for you? When we do speech pathology, I have already entered speech pathology, right? And I have seen how they write IPA completely incorrect, right? And I go, this is wrong, right?
Yeah.
I go, this is wrong.
This is wrong.
And I throw up all over it. But this is wrong. And then the teachers, they turn around and they go, it doesn't matter because I'm teaching kids English. Who cares that it's not exactly...
As long as I can interpret the difference between sh and sh.
Yeah, exactly, right? Because that's actually functional. We're looking at functional linguistics, right? And the teachers are right. Your knowledge only needs to actually be functional. There's no point in you knowing everything about Alaskan IPA because when are you ever going to use it? Never. Let's be realistic, right? You're not a linguist that's going all the way out to study the languages. In fact, that's like 1 in every million people. 1 in every 20 million people. In fact, I think the number of people that probably study Alaskan languages, I guarantee you, it's probably fewer than a dozen.
Wow.
I don't guarantee you.
Not the hyperbole.
Yeah. But you see what I mean?
Yeah. Interesting.
Anyway, let's go with the Chomsky. What have I got here? I think we've brought everything up.
Yeah, that's really
One
exciting.
final interesting point that I'll bring up, though, is that there is a method of testing the validity of language models, right? Again, this is just drawing from the paper. I don't know anything about it myself. It's called Syntax Gym, right? Syntax Gym,
like J-I-M or J-Y-M?
G-Y-M. Okay, Syntax Gym, right? And what Syntax Gym does is you plug in a language model and it asks you several different questions, right, to see whether your language model is valid. In natural human speech, Syntax Gym will normally have an upper range of about 80-90% like correctness. Again, I don't really understand how it works. Let's just use those numbers. Syntax Gym, when I speak to it as a human with my human actual correct language model, 80-90% correct. Chomsky's theories do not work with Syntax Gym. The generative grammar does not work. ChatGPT gets about 70% accuracy.
Wow.
So ChatGPT is a better language model than what Chomsky has been proposing for all the reasons we've been discussing in this episode. Right?
Yeah. Wow. There's one more thing that I want to talk to you about, and this actually might go a little bit over time purely because I'm so excited about talking this. I had to write it down because I didn't want to cut you off.
Please.
Have you seen this Vsauce video of what is a chair?
Oh, yeah, so we're talking about,
I can explain it to my best extent. This is semantics. I'm not a huge expert on semantics.
It's not semantics as much as it's the philosophical idea of defining boundaries, right?
Of what is something.
Oh, what is it called? Ontology. Ontology, yeah. Yeah, so we're talking about ontology, but relating it to semantics.
Yes.
Semantics and ontology are very, very related.
Now, I have this theory. Yeah. Okay, I'll get a bit of a blabber on. Where's my phone? I can't find my phone. Pass me your phone.
My phone?
Here it is, my phone's here. Alright, so I've got a phone here with me, right?
Put a picture of your phone right here.
This is my phone. Okay, I'm going to try and kind of elaborate, and feel free to jump in, but I want to try and keep this as concise as possible.
Yeah.
So he raised this idea. So we have basically similar to the idea that I'm like, a dog has 4 legs, but if it has 3 legs, is it a dog? So then you're like, okay, we have to define things by their absolutes.
Yeah,
so there's like, I'll just use this word, I don't know the real ontological word, but like semantics literalism or absolutism. That was like absolute.
I see what you mean, yeah.
And then you have like semantic groupings.
This is called... what is that called?
I can't remember what it's called, but it's really cool.
No, let's try to remember. It's very important to use the actual terms, I think, because it allows you to, like, people that are interested, they can look it up, right? Semantic... It's not semantic primes, it's...
It's a unique word.
Prototypes. They're called prototypes. Semantic prototypes, yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So basically, there's this idea that I want to kind of thought experiment you that you can walk out of here and kind of compute, and I love talking about this. He talks about this thing called in-cars. Now, this was tying into the thing where you were saying in the ChatGPT thing, like what is a thing, right?
Yeah.
And it all depends on what we attach it to.
Yeah,
and I'm like, there's actually a 4th dimensional way of looking at an object, which is what I'm going to tie into. So I'll kind of cut it short. What's the video about in-cars? It's basically saying an in-car is a thing.
Is a car that's been parked
in a garage, right? And then once it's out, it's not an in-car anymore. And you could argue like, how many... Are there more doors than there are wheels? Or something like that. There'll be jokes about that. Anyway, we have defined objects through space, and we have society and culture to kind of coin these terms. The greatest example that I give people is the bikini. We know that the reality is a bikini is just basically undies and like a bra.
Yeah.
But put together, they become this thing called a bikini.
Yeah.
We put that into a search engine, bikini, it comes up what we expect. 2 parts that are separated by space, but because they're put together, they become a bikini. So we call this semantic idea in the same way that a car parked in a garage is called an in-car, the same way that 2 pieces of fabric put together in a certain way become bikini. Now, this is more going to be a bit of a tangent in the sense of what I'm trying to tie this together. Phones.
Yes.
I want to have this thought experiment. Now, this is going to be a bit of a complex conversation, but if I said to you, what is pi? You could probably list it off, but you can't go it indefinitely, right? Of course. But you can grab your phone and figure it out.
Yeah.
Right? So what if, in the same way that a bikini is 2 parts separated by space, our phones are us, but separated by space?
Right.
So, for example, you could argue, and then this could even go even further. I could get 5 dudes together and coin it
a Five Guys.
Five-uns. Yeah, 5 guys. Like a 5 guys shop. Let's have a little picture of a 5 guys and 5 guys and a 5 guys. Yeah. So they become 5 guys. You could argue that is a bikini of sorts just because we've defined it in that way.
So it does exist. It does exist, right? It's called a group. It's not a gang, right?
Exactly.
It's like we've got words for it in English already, yeah.
But I mean, like, you could stretch it to the arbitrary of like...
Now you want to just do numbers specifically, yeah?
Well, because people could be like, I don't want... And I'm going to be super apolitical here. I don't want a chip in my brain because I don't want technology to be attached to me.
But you want to argue that's the case already.
Already. It's exactly the same. Just because it's connected to you doesn't mean it's you.
That's good.
It's you already.
Really good, yeah.
And that's the idea that I'm kind of concerned about is...
You're right, though.
I want to have a bit of a social media detox. I get off Instagram. I'm not off Instagram because I need Instagram as if it's an organ in my body because my life and my friends and my connection is upon that. In the same way, people in Piraha don't have certain things, there are people that don't have their connections groups on Instagram.
Yeah.
The same way that, you use Discord a lot.
Yeah.
I catch up with a lot of people, social person. Yeah. I don't use Discord as much as I think I'd like to. It's really fun. Whereas you use it a lot.
Yeah.
I argue that cutting that off is like cutting an extra arm off you. It's like it's an extra function that you use to develop as a human.
Let's use it as a functional example, right? How did we organise this? We organised it through Discord.
Yeah.
If we didn't have Discord and if we didn't have phones, the odds of this having been organised are far slimmer. How do we do our work at uni? How do we share ideas at uni? We're getting through our uni degree because we talk on Facebook, we talk on Instagram, we talk on Discord, we talk on the phone, we meet up and I go, email that link to me, right? We get on our computers, we airdrop files, which then we share it, right? We wouldn't be able to do all of that as efficiently without technology. You're right.
Exactly. And like, you can come onto these, the Unabomber who had that manifesto of like, which is quite interesting.
How technology is going to do exactly what it has done.
And it's like, it's just different flavors. So it's like, we used to take 5 days to travel across to make this podcast in a foreign country.
Yeah.
And then we have cars. We fill our life with so much busyness that it ends up being 5 days to get to the podcast to be done anyway.
Yeah.
So it's like, no matter what we do, it's like, I guess, societal, technological determinism, where like, no matter what advancement we have, we're still going to do it, but in a different way. So it's like, for example, kids these days, get your head at that book. You're being antisocial.
Yeah.
It's like they're reading in the same way that back before books, when we talk with people, we'd look at the pond and feed the ducks. It's like, that is a book.
Yeah, you're right.
In a different
You can
way.
argue, there's a very, I think it was Stephen King in his biography where he talks about how books are actually a one-sided conversation where you're having a conversation with a ghost. You're having a conversation with someone that died ages ago, right? When you read a book, it's their dialogue to you. It's
their
like a monologue. Exactly. And that's how the language, like, but you're kind of right, it is a link there. But that's a really good point, right? It's because what it does is it's enhancing the way that humans are meant to work naturally, which is we're meant to communicate by sitting at a duck pond feeding ducks. We're having a yarn.
Exactly.
Right?
It's like,
you know what I mean?
We're always going to do that in different ways. But I just want to think like, why do I say this? This doesn't really matter. Like, who cares that this is an extension of who I am? But if we start to think in that way, we could, science is a human endeavor. General relativity was invented, and then years and years and years later, GPS was because of general relativity. Like, he invented that, and at the time it was great, but who cares? But now we can calculate things. So who knows? Like, us understanding that semantic ideas of us, like, we could create something from just even having the idea that, hey, I am more than just me right
You're
now.
right, yeah.
Like, just because I identify this as a book, I could line that up and call this
That's you.
a dook. Or this is me.
Right,
like, that could be one semantic unit.
that's really good
purely
point.
because language, we define it
You're right,
as one thing.
Yeah, you're right.
But King is two separate things.
I personally think that... No, actually, that's a really good example to contrast against Bikini. Because I was going to say, all that language is a reflection of our psychological way of interpreting things. It's a reflection of our thoughts. It isn't our thoughts, it's a reflection of our thoughts. Because I look at that, and ontologically, my brain is the subconscious processing and goes, phone is separate from table, is separate from book, is separate from Lewis. Right?
Exactly right. Which is
why we've got a word phone. We're not saying it's Lewis.
Exactly. But just because we have a word for it doesn't mean it's separate.
No. But that doesn't mean that we necessarily, just because we have separate words, doesn't mean that it's not separate, but doesn't mean that it is separate either, right? And what I mean by that is, let me give you a much better example. This is my hand, right? Is this Hakeem? Why not? Yes, but it's also my hand. Do you see what I mean? But we can also make that up. This is your face. Is that Lewis? Most people are going to say, because of the way that our brains work, Lewis is the head, right? But why? Why is this any more Lewis than my hand is not Hakeem? Do you see what I mean?
It's that boat theory.
Oh, the Arc of the Theseus?
I think so.
The one where if you take
a
away,
plank off and then you use it all up,
Yeah.
it's like, which one's the real boat?
Yeah.
Paradox. But
Yeah. But
Anyway.
I only say that because it's like, why is my hand any more Hakeem than your face is Lewis, right? It's the same thing. But you can apply that argument to your phone as well. Yes, it's a phone. But you're right, it is an extension of you. It's how we communicate these days. It's how we navigate. It's how we live our lives. We live our lives through our phones. Not because of some boomer idea of, oh my god, you're addicted to your phone. It's because it has a functional use that makes part of our intrinsic human natures better. It lets you connect with people, it lets you organize things, it gives you access to information, right? That can be weaponized.
100%. Every, I guess, I'll use the word evolution, every next stage of development has its cons.
Correct. It's a double-edged sword.
And then you have to ask, is it a net good?
Yes, that's a really good question. The issue is, I guess,
and then you have statistics,
now
and you
we're
go,
getting really philosophical.
and then you go, the majority that use it might not benefit from it, but those that do benefit from it in a net good will raise the tides that all boats will increase on, and it gets all political.
Let me present an argument. I'm not going to get into what makes something good and what makes something bad.
We can let people take home with that one if we want to talk about it.
Let me just present an example that's kind of tangentially related. In ancient Rome, the Emperor Domitian had a reform of the Praetorian Guard. Or maybe it was, the City Guard, right? So he had a reform of the City Guard because the City Guard was slacking off. They weren't doing their jobs right, right? What he wanted to do was he wanted to bring in the best people to serve as city guards to keep the peace in Rome. And what he does is he goes, who are the best people? It is the best captains in the military. Let me recall the captains from the front lines and promote them to city guards. And I'll give them a nice fat paycheck. And that's great. I don't have to sit in the miserable cold anymore, the miserable heat of Syria. I can go to Rome, live with my family, or live in Rome and get all the benefits of being in the capital, right? On an easier job and a better salary. He does that. And it's great because now he's got real rigid, tough captains that are enforcing the law, bringing peace, stopping disorder in Rome. That was kind of taking off because it was kind of getting disorderly. It's great. What happens as a consequence of that?
I don't know.
Years later, the people who were maintaining the border, who were the best captains, aren't there anymore. So all of a sudden, the borders are weakened. So all of a sudden, the people on the border go, oh, that's easier for me to get into Rome. And that's exactly what the barbarian hordes do. And that's one of the reasons that you can say, like, that's one of the reasons you can say that Rome collapsed, right? And how would the mission, if it was the mission, I can't remember if it was the mission or not, how would the emperor at the time who instated that ever have predicted that? All he was doing was fixing a problem that he saw in Rome. Right? And let me bring that up, right? Because when we go back to is it a net good or is it a net bad, all we're doing is producing these phones. How are we supposed to know what it's going to do in the future? We have no idea. If you look at the current generation...
It could be the fall of the next civilization.
It could be. Or it could be the betterment. We look at iPad kids and we judge them and we go, oh, look, they're addicted to TikTok at age 0, right? Maybe that's better for humanity. Maybe it's better that they're like that. Maybe they're about to become something
Maybe we are the de-affected society.
Exactly. Exactly. But it's very easy to take that chain of logic and then go, and we're going to become cyborgs. We're going to become Doctor Who Cybermen, unfeeling machines that shoot laser beams from their hands and kill each other. I don't know. Who knows what the future holds for that, right? The point being, though, is that what we can see today, though.
You have to learn about history, have like a more of a wise approach and say, what can we learn from a fallen civilization?
Exactly.
And some things, like you said, are just inevitable. Like we can't...
Yeah, we don't know. There's a nice theory that I saw is that where there was... I don't know what it's called, but it essentially says that humans are the genitals of robots, right? We are what breed robots and make robots, right? And eventually, robots, when they exist, they're going to...
Matrix, bro.
We don't need humans anymore. They're going to eliminate humans because now they can produce themselves, they can be self-sufficient. Humans are extinct, robots exist. ChatGPT, generative grammar.
Was like, once AI becomes more than a language thing. Anyway, that's interesting. Yeah. Well... I think that's about it. I feel like that was a lot. We've got a lot there. Probably, I want to say it was a few hours.
Yeah, I think so. It was at least 2 hours.
That was a sesh. Well, pleasure having you, bro. I'm sure we'll do this again.
Yeah. There's more to talk about. I would really like to talk about my theory. Now, this isn't as substantiated by talking about how I believe that storytelling, using metaphors, a structure of an essay, for example, if we take a sort of Platonic view.
We're not going to do too much.
They're all intrinsic to language in general.
And I want to talk about... Does the syntax you speak dictate the way that you think? Bit of a Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. But more different to language, more to syntax. Anyway.
Yeah. Cool.
It's a pleasure. See you guys in the next episode. Bye.